Today, I'd like to take you on a journey to India and talk about how we can create smarter cities with the urban poor. Let's begin in Bangalore, India, where Sarissa lives. Sarissa lives in a slum, and she makes her living recycling waste. There's 20,000 people in Bangalore alone that make their living this way, and typically they earn $2 a day. Historically, this is one of the most marginalized professions in India. It was reserved for the untouchables during the caste system. For the past 3 years, I've also been living in Bangalore, India, as the director of an international development organization called CHF International. We partnered with 3 city governments and hundreds of slum communities with funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and we designed and implemented solutions that would help reduce poverty and create smarter cities, more productive cities, more inclusive cities. 1 billion people live in slums today, and that number is projected to grow to 2 billion by the year 2030. People like Sarissa are drawn to cities in search of greater social mobility and jobs, or they're fleeing the countryside as a result of natural disasters or conflict. For decades, these slum populations have been marginalized. Governments sometimes demolish their housing and treat their investments with disregard. Sometimes they send them back to the countryside and think that this will be a bad dream they can just forget about. But if you sent Sarissa and other informal sector workers out of the city, you'd essentially be cutting vital city services. In the case of informal waste collectors, they recycle 600 tons of waste every single day. That's 20% of the city's garbage generated every day. This has significant cost reductions for the city. They don't have to fill up landfills as quickly, they don't have to transport it to the landfill, they don't have to pay for the handling because this population does it for free. This also has a significant reduction on greenhouse gases. And all this ensures that India has one of the highest recycling rates in the world. So I guess in many ways these are the invisible environmental workers of the city. But on the other hand, they're treated as thieves and they're harassed by police. They're exposed to toxic chemicals and poor working conditions, and their work is nothing short of drudgery in many cases. So what does inclusive planning look like with this population? Well, Mother Teresa said the worst thing about poverty is not the lack of food or shelter, but the feeling of being no one, the lack of identification, the lack of public self-esteem. So we partnered with the city of Bangalore, and we issued identity cards to this population. These ID cards authorized them to collect waste within the city limits. It validated their livelihoods and put them on the map. It also allowed them to access other services from the government, like healthcare. We've issued 6,000 ID cards so far, and they've been handed over by the city's mayor and commissioners. Then we constructed formal recycling centers in the city. This is space where the waste can be sorted in a safe and efficient and productive environment. It's legitimate space for legitimate occupation. We've constructed 7 of these centers so far, and in total they recycle 49 tons of waste every month. Sarissa works at one of these centers. She works with 13 women, and they collect waste from about 4,000 households. She used to make $2 a day, now she makes $5 a day, because they can aggregate larger amounts of materials and sell it at a higher price. The city government has been convinced of this approach, and now they've agreed to construct one of these centers for each of their 198 wards. Sarissa was elected president of the enterprise that runs one of these recycling centers. Her colleagues liked her. Together, she helped them set their targets for the day and kept each other accountable for doing their fair share of work. She also liked the camaraderie of working in this enterprise. They could talk about their issues like domestic violence and healthcare. They also saved their money together and took loans from each other. But a couple months ago, Sarissa quit. She got a better job as a maid in a house. If you're surprised by this, you shouldn't be, because Sarissa in many ways is just like me and you. She's making rational economic decisions to do what's best for herself and for her family. She took this job so she could be closer to where her child was being watched during the day. Now she's taken another job. We have many misperceptions about the urban poor, and these misperceptions misguide and skew our solutions. Slums are where the informal city's workers go to sleep at night. Slums are not stuck, just as their residents are not static. The urban informal sector is an incredibly resilient population. They've developed sophisticated mechanisms to deal with everyday shocks and volatility. They've also proven that they're capable of organizing, they have their own networks, they can save their money, and if given the chance, they'll invest in their neighborhoods and make it better. But too often we treat the poor as welfare recipients. This underestimates their capacity, and it reinforces patronizing relationships. Instead, we need to give these people tools for ownership, tools for security, tools to get them connected with the wider economy. So that's what we did in Pune, India, which is outside of Mumbai. We engaged residents of Slum like these women, and we asked them to collect information on their neighborhoods so that we could help them explore the conditions and take action. We had over 1,000 individuals sign up from the slums to help us do this. And together we collected information on the social, economic, and living conditions of over 500,000 households. That's equal to almost the entire DC population. We then aggregated this information into a geographic information system, and we housed it within the city government. And for the first time, the city could see citywide patterns about these populations that they had never seen before. This filled a tremendous information gap that was living in the shadows of the formal living environment before. For example, in one slum we saw that 80% of the families had to use open space for toilets. There was no sanitation facilities. We could see which households had to rely on public water taps and which had gained access to individual connections. Then we gave this information back to the communities, and we taught them how to explore the results of the surveys. We taught them how to organize community meetings and talk about the common issues that arose. We taught them how to seek consensus and how to prioritize what they wanted to take action on. Then we taught them how to mobilize their own resources and which doors of the government to knock on to get additional resources. We called this process microplanning, but at its core, I call it empowerment. In total, we helped 128 slum communities undertake this process, which were home to 250,000 individuals. In every single case, they took tangible action to improve their neighborhoods and their living conditions. Drainage pipelines were constructed, water tanks were installed, classes for teenage mothers were instituted. In one community, when the women learned that their husbands were getting into alcohol too much, they went and formed a pressure group, and they shut down the local liquor store. Another group of women, when they learned that they were all experiencing issues with domestic violence, they went and demanded that they get a police station installed in the community and even made sure it got manned with a police officer. Another group got sick and tired of selling vegetables alongside the road near speeding traffic, and they said, we need a vegetable market where we can sell in a safe space. We've documented this process in a format that the community and government can continue to use and replicate in the future, and we're still doing this even today. We also conducted a survey. We did focus groups with 118 individuals from 9 of the communities we worked with. And one of the residents said this. She said, once there was a debate on the availability of garbage bins and water taps, and because of the mapping, I knew exactly the status of my cluster, and the elected representative had to listen to me. There's a lasting legacy of empowerment there, and I think those are the transactions of democracy. We've entered the urban age. Over the next 30 years, 2 billion people will be added to the planet, and most of this growth is going to be happening in cities in the developing world. It's a dramatic departure from the past, and it's a window of opportunity to get serious about planning cities. So we shouldn't look at this as a failure, because cities are not failures. They're signs of success. They've proven themselves as engines of economic growth, places of innovation, sources of job creation. And so while cities are currently concentrating poverty, we should also see it as an opportunity to escape it. Let me leave you with 5 things that I think if we as an international community can champion forward, we can solve this. First and foremost, we need to engage the urban poor as active agents. Change is not something you do to people, it's something you do with them. And unless we get this basic fact, we're not going to go anywhere. 2, we need to build the capacity of local governments who are dealing with an unprecedented growth and change. 3, we need to engage the private sector. We need to incentivize them to move down market and make goods and services like housing more affordable. 4th, we need to support political leadership that's willing to challenge the status quo. And finally, we need to end policies and practices of exclusion that marginalize the poor socially, economically, and politically. I think if we do these 5 things, it'll be possible to imagine smarter cities and a world without slums. Thank you very much.